Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is Ukraine War News Update, the first part thereof for the 14th of October 2025. I am a little bit late to it today, sorry about that. Had to take my dad to his dementia drugs appointment just to make sure everything's tickety-boo with the drugs he's taking, no side effects, blah blah blah. So that kind of personal stuff getting in the way of telling you about what's going on in war in Ukraine. So let's get to the Ukrainian General Staff figures for those Russian losses for the day before. We have another day of high personnel losses. If we go and look at Dell Stats, who dutifully uploads these stats on a daily basis, we're just going to be looking at this reddish row here. That's the personnel losses. You can see on the 1st of October, 920, 980, 970, 950, down to 870. Talking about the weather being bad around that period. And then it shot up to 1,090. So you've got a good 200 extra personnel being lost on that day. Then 1,020, 1,010, 1,020, 1,120 on the 10th, 1,060, 1,240 on the 12th, 1,140 yesterday, and 1,000, or essentially 2 days ago, 1,200 for yesterday. Those last 3 days are much higher than we've seen previously. We were down in the 900s consistently. So something has happened over the last week. And I would suggest that the Russians are attacking a number of places. Ukrainians attacking as well here and there. It's a bit of a interesting situation in the south around Mali-Shabaki, on the Zaporizhzhia front. But in other places, the Ukrainians are under the Kosh somewhat. Pokrovsky's obviously a very difficult area. Then you've got Dobropillia. So lots going on, and the troop losses have gone up. We have 5 tanks lost yesterday, 145 vehicles and fuel tanks, added to which there are 29 artillery systems. So that's gone back up. I find it fascinating there are no troop carrying AFVs, because we are hearing about large columns attacking yesterday. So I'm presuming tomorrow you might have a few more numbers in that category. If we look at the AFVs, that's this row here, then you have going back, oh look, that up to 77 on that day. So that's a readjustment there. That's why it's in red. Shown as plus 13, but should be plus 77 because the whole totals went up. So that means they've adjusted the figures. They sometimes do this. Other information comes in, like this day. There are many different pieces of kit changes, different category changes there for whatever reason it was. But anyway, just generally speaking, 13, 12, 15, 18, 18, 29. That's artillery. We want to look at AFV. Sorry. So 3, 2, 1, 1, 1, 1, 14, and that was on and another 14 a few days later, 6, 5, 1, 14. That was on a day when there were some reports of a seriously big attack that was thwarted, and then 6 the next day, then 0, 0, and 0, and yet we are seeing a number of reports suggesting quite a few bits of kit were destroyed. So if they're not listed tomorrow, then something weird's going on, because there's definitely video evidence of these attacks, and we'll look at them in a second. So high on the vehicles and fuel tanks numbers there, 145. That's really shot back up to well over 100. So definitely activity taking place on the front line. Now, we hear from the Kyiv Independent that over 300 Belarusian nationals have been killed fighting for Russia in Ukraine. The I Want to Live project, I quoted numbers from them recently in terms of wounded, killed, deserted POWs. They estimated that roughly 1 in 4 of the Belarusian citizens that were fighting or have been fighting for Russia have died. So 25% death probability for the Belarusians there. I guess, though, I wonder what the probability, and this goes to both sides, it's a pretty macabre thought to have, but if you were fighting back in at the beginning of the war, February 2024, what are the chances you're still alive? And I guess your hope would be that you move up the command. If you've been fighting that long, you've got the experience, and then you get moved to doing other jobs. You're unlikely to still be in the trenches. Maybe there are people who are, though. Some almost 4 years later. And I wonder what the difference between probability of survival over that time period is between the two countries there. Anyway, moving on. So this is what I was talking about in terms of, a big attack. This is another one that happened yesterday near Dobropillia, a massive Russian assault with 16 armored vehicles. Of course, that is today's massive. Back some years ago, that would be an attack of 60, not 16. That would be an attack of 60. Certainly, we saw many columns of over 30 vehicles attacking. Units from the Azov 1st National Guards Corps, air assault forces and unmanned systems forces took part in repelling this attack. The result was 9 IFVs, 4 APCs, 3 tanks and 3 motorcycles were destroyed. Of course, they don't figure on yesterday's numbers nor the day before. So if you're talking about 9 infantry fighting vehicles, we've got 0, 0, 0, 6 and 14. So unless this is a very delayed claim of an attack, then I would hope you're going to see those numbers tomorrow. 78 troops as well lost in that attack. So you can go and watch. This is a 2-minute video detailing what took place. You can go and watch this at your own leisure. Lots of typical footage of vehicles getting targeted by a range of different munitions and whatnot. I don't even know that was that a. I don't know that if that was a drone or a mine. I think it's probably a drone there, and certainly that's a drone. As you can see, the drone flying in there. So, yeah, there are definitely traditional combat assets being taken out. There's, as you can see, there's a column of more vehicles, and it forwards onto this point, and they just seem to be picked off one after the other. And there you go. So they've definitely lost some vehicles. The question is when and whether we will see those stats tomorrow. There's a bit more detail on that attack. Tim White says soldiers from Azov claim a massive Russian attack in Donetsk has been thwarted today, so yesterday. The invaders were trying to storm Dobropillia again. 78 Russians were allegedly killed, and they did publish a lot of detail. So let's read some of this. So on October the 13th, so this was a claim for yesterday, it wasn't from some time back, at Dobropillia, the enemy made another attempt to conduct mechanized assaults on the positions of the Ukrainian defense forces in the area of responsibility of the 1st Corps of the Azov military district. The enemy launched 16 units of heavy armored vehicles, BMP, MTLB and tanks into the offensive. As a result of the defensive actions, 9 infantry fighting vehicles, as mentioned, 4 APCs, 3 tanks, 3 motorcycles were destroyed. The attacks took place in the direction of settlements of Myrnohrad and Rozinsky, I think that might be, Rozino. The enemy's main efforts were concentrated on capturing the settlement of Shakova. The enemy's tactics remain unchanged. In the first wave of the offensive, motorcyclists followed by armored vehicles with infantry on board, using electronic warfare systems to suppress drones of the defense forces of Ukraine units for protection. The columns intended to deliver infantrymen to settlements who, after landing, were to gain a foothold and subsequently begin offensive operations to capture the specified settlements. We're going to return to this idea of electronic warfare in a second, because there are some claims from some Russians. Anyway, thanks to the timely mining and coordinated actions of the defense forces of Ukraine units, primarily artillery crews of the armed forces brigades, units of the National Guard and crews of the unmanned systems forces, the enemy's plans were thwarted. Confirmed enemy losses amounted to 78 servicemen. We thank the units of the Airborne Assault and Assault Forces, National Guard of Ukraine, Ground Forces, Air Force and State Border Service. So unmanned systems forces, logistics forces and support forces. Everyone's involved there, piling in, whose soldiers demonstrate courage and professionalism every day. So talk about mining. There, you're we are seeing an awful lot of mines being dropped by drones, triggered by different methods. The Russians have been complaining about them too. So here we have Rob Lee showing 4 different bits of footage, and this is, yep, of course, heavily musical videos here. So you can see these fairly substantial columns attacking, talking about that, and showing a number of different videos He says that videos from Ukraine's 1st Azov Corps, the Air Assault Forces, and the 82nd Air Assault Brigade show artillery, FPV, night bomber, drone attacks on Russianized mechanized assaults with turtle tanks and motorcycles on the Dobropillia front in the past few days. Another video there. He also references this. Now, this is what it's telling you about. Russian blogger Filatov posted the video feed intercepted from the Ukrainian FPVs that destroyed the MTLBs near Myrnohrad today. So that's in the cross direction. He complains the issue of electronic warfare and jamming is not solved despite other claims. And that's self-evident really from these videos, as they show drones not jammed, clearly blowing up Russian kit. Kasparov, who is fighting on the front, I presume he's in the Pokrovsk area now. He used to be up in Kursk. Said of the 13th, the 5th Motorized Brigade, alongside with the infamous 155th Marine Brigade, launched an attack near Pokrovsk. So this is 155th Naval Infantry Brigade, who were previously in Vuhledar, got absolutely banjaxed there a whole bunch of times, been reconstituted, went up to Kursk. They were absolutely mauled up in Kursk, and then have been sent down to the Pokrovsk region, where they appear to be having a pretty tough time there. They used dozens of IFVs, says Kasparov. Due to my information from a friend of mine, they've lost 18 infantry fighting vehicles, including BMP-2s and 3s and MTLBs. Weeks ago, I said that this was going to happen. So they seem to be going back to using quite a bit of equipment to do these large-scale attacks. But luckily for the Ukrainians, the Ukrainians have been prepared using mines, drones, FPV drones dropping mines and dropping IEDs and all sorts. So, and obviously you're going to have artillery too. So hopefully the Ukrainians have done a good job of treating the Russians here to the point where the Russians are unable to force a breakthrough. Shakov is a really important town that the Ukrainians are trying desperately to keep hold of, and it gives them the ability to continue to try and cut off those encirclements in the bunny ears sort of area of Dobropillia. Here is a war-translated shared video. Russian forces attempted to breach Myrnohrad from the east with two MTLBs, that should be, I think, vehicles, from the north with 4 motorcycles. Both assaults in the 7th Corps area of responsibility were repelled and failed, is the claim there. So multiple attacks being repelled. Another video just came out this morning from the southern front. This is Ukraine's 33rd Assault Regiment and 24th ADAR Battalion. In fact, I think Zelenskyy talked about some success here. This is the Mali Shebaki area on that Zaporizhzhia front. The ADAR Battalion broke through Russian defences in that Orikhiv sector. And I believe they got sort of 3.5 kilometers in, so that they did a fairly good job liberating Mali Shebaki itself and parts of Stepova, and captured Russian troops to expand the exchange fund. So they also took some POWs there. It's not to say all is going well for the Ukrainians everywhere. They're under an awful lot of pressure, everywhere on the front line. It is tough at the moment, tough for both sides, right? So Wiki has a thread on Russian troops in the Dnipro River Delta on the islands there who are dying of starvation, according to Russian war bloggers. They say that swarms of Ukrainian drones have caused extreme logistical difficulties. Now, this is one video that shows the prevalence of Ukrainian drones hammering at Russian boats and people hiding out on islands. And actually a number of these videos have come out over the last week. I've seen more videos from Dnipro Delta this week than I've seen for an awful long time, to be perfectly fair. Leading to soldiers being cut off for months, it says here. So the marshy islands of the lower Dnipro below Kherson city have been contested by both sides since 2022. Neither side controls them, but recently leaked casualty figures show that over 5,100 Russians have been killed in the region since January the 1st, 2025. Wow, this has been a very costly area. I don't know where those stats have come from, but 5,100 killed in this area alone is insane. In the region, obviously, that's going to be the wider Kherson region. Two Russian war bloggers highlight what's been going on there. Call sign Osetin writes, quote, fighting continues on the islands in the Kherson direction, slightly less frequently, but it's still happening. Few people write about it, but our men on the islands are true heroes. So these are the islands down here. One of these, this one here, that's Potemkin Island. And then I think, yeah, all these islands, these ones over here, you can see possibly more contested. But anyway, where was I? The skies are men on the islands are true heroes. The skies are under constant control from both sides, and holding on to these areas is very difficult. I want to unpick that. The skies can't be under control by both sides, but maybe contested by both sides, and they constantly are flying around. The problem with the boats hasn't been resolved. No one talks about it anymore. The soldiers are forced to buy motors and the boats out of their own pockets. Now, remember, we had a previous thread where in this area they were sabotaging their own boats so they didn't have to go out on these suicidal sorties. It is, who would want to get on a boat and knowing how many drones are around, knowing that it's likely going to be an outcome like this? No wonder they are sort of putting holes in their boats and damaging the engines on purpose. That was a claim previously. So the lack of boats and motors has been highlighted previously by Russian soldiers who complained that the Russian military isn't providing them and they have to purchase them themselves. That video, by the way, is from 7 months ago. Reserve Pioneer, another war blogger, concurs and adds, quote, I agree, no one has mentioned the island area in the Kherson direction for a long time, but fierce fighting continues there. The entire sky is obscured by birds, drones that is, making it impossible to deliver food and ammunition. There are confirmed cases of soldiers spending up to 80 days on the islands due to the impossibility of rotation and evacuation. This explains the large number of missing persons. The situation is dire. There are confirmed cases of death from starvation, again, all due to the enormous logistical difficulties. The lower sky is closed. Perhaps that's why no one writes about this area, because the situation there is dire. This is a very important and necessary line of defence, and as soon as we weaken there, the enemy, God forbid, will be able to occupy the islands and the 10-driven Kimburn spits, which, to put it mildly, will cause enormous problems. So there's an interesting idea here that actually, when you start, let's go and look at Andrew Perpetua's map. When you, if you are able to take control of these islands, then perhaps that has a knock-on effect of then being able to think about the Kimburn spit here and the Tendra spit, so that, there must be some advantage that you convey from control of these further to the west. Worth considering. Just to finish off this thread, also, unfortunately, there is no movement on the coast occupied by the Ukrainians. Yes, there are some forays, but these are small groups. All the guys I talk to say they're ready to jump to the other shore, but they're waiting for orders that haven't come. So for now, they're holding on to the islands and spits. Okay, so that's a little bit of an insight into what's going on there. Andrew Perpetua, who hasn't actually doesn't post as much at the moment. I don't know if he's just overwhelmed with the amount of data that's out there and the work load that he has. Sad, these are good at shooting down drones and other low-flying things like cruise missiles. I've talked about the APKWS, the 70mm rockets, the Hydra rockets that have been given laser systems that are really good at shooting down drones and indeed cruise missiles, and they're getting a whole bunch more of these as well. Here is one of the systems being taken out by Russian drones here, and you can see that that is, by the looks of it, a Lancet that has a pretty good success there. It gets the APKWS rocket to fire off by the looks of it, and yeah, that's that piece of kit pretty soundly taken out. You can see the size of that explosion compared to, so these are your near rear strike drones that the Russians are relying on. They're really good at taking out, well, they can be good at taking out bits of equipment. They can also bounce off. The warhead, if I remember correctly, is about 3.5 to 4.5 kilograms, something like that. And they go up to the usually sort of 70-kilometer drones, I think. There's some debate over what the range of the more recent Lancets are or is. It's worth noting that the FP, which one is it? FP1, FP2, the medium range drone, not the long range ones, but the one where they give a much bigger warhead. Those are 105 kilogram warheads. So I doubt you'd even use those kind of drones to take out these bits of kit, or if you do, I mean, it'll be bye-bye that bit of kit completely. Whereas you wonder whether something like that's ever fixable, given that, yeah, it is on fire, but it's not fundamentally disassembled. But anyway, the Ukrainians are really trying to strike back now with their own indigenously made medium-range drones. They do have other procured medium-range drones. I think the Ram 2X, is that from abroad? You've got the Warmate from Poland, and another bunch of those sorts of drones. And of course, the HQ2s, the ones from Germany that can use AI, I think, as well, for targeting. Anyway, the Washington Post is reporting that China has materially helped Russia gain a key battlefield advantage in its grinding war against Ukraine, increasing exports over the summer of key components needed to make fiber optic drones that have enabled Moscow to overwhelm Ukrainian defenses on the front lines. Beijing claims it's neutral in the conflict, and Chinese manufacturers, which account for 80% of the global commercial drone market, have reduced their direct exports of ready-made drones to Russia. Chinese shipments of fiber optic cables to Russia grew almost tenfold between July and August, after hitting record highs in May and then again in June. According to the data from China's Customs Office, exports of lithium-ion batteries, probably used to power the drones, also shot up over the summer as Russia stepped up its aerial assaults on Ukraine. So the Washington Post has an article, behind Russia's battlefield drone surge in Ukraine, Chinese factories. Chinese sales of fiber optic cable and lithium-ion batteries to Russian drone makers surged over the summer, underscoring Beijing's no-limits ties with Moscow. Okay, on to distant strikes now, and the Ukrainians had to deal with 96 drones sent into their airspace last night. They did intercept 69 of them, but that still gives almost yet again, 27 seems to be such a common number of drones that successfully get through. That's a lot of drones finding their mark. Ukraine hit with 96 drones, including around 60 Shaheds, launched from multiple directions, including Russia and occupied Crimea. Air defences shot down or suppressed 69 of them across the north, south, east and centre. 7 locations were struck. Zelenskyy says that Ukraine will deploy additional helicopter groups to hunt Russian drones that strike every night. I've talked about the success of helicopters an awful lot, and we saw one helicopter with 122 notches on its hull there, on its nose, showing you that just that one helicopter had inordinate success. Another one with sort of 30 odd on its nose, but these are very effective methods of taking down drones. The only challenge is just the sheer amount of airspace they have to cover. And obviously the key then is getting more helicopters and more helicopter pilots. I was wondering, actually, because they're using some Mi-8s, probably some of these other helicopters they've received from Portugal. They're getting these Sea Kings. They had 3 Sea Kings from the UK and a bunch of Sea Kings from Germany, which are usually used, certainly at this point in the war. They're not going to be attack helicopters. Our Sea Kings were used more for air-sea rescue before they were replaced by the Merlin and now commercial helicopters. But Sea Kings, I mean, you could easily just whack a machine gun or in the doors to a Sea King and do this with Sea Kings, I'm sure as well. So, there are options for them with helicopters that are coming, but obviously, more helicopters as well as pilots and crew are trained, the better. So the new groups will protect key infrastructure, and Kyiv is also working with partners to acquire more helicopters and aircraft to boost air defense. So that can be fixed-wing aircraft as well, such as the Yak-52s. We know the Russians are using training jets such as the Yak-150 to do that work as well. Okay, at night though, the Russians shelled the crap out of Kharkiv, I believe, with guided aerial bombs. It's obviously close enough to be able to do that with impunity, it appears. The mayor of Kharkiv reported a fire at the hospital, so the hospital was hit. Some images coming out of there following the attacks. It's also known that 4 people were injured. I think they've had to move a lot of patients from that hospital out. Terrifying scenes in Kharkiv tonight as Russian airdropped bombs hit the city. Explosions caused large fires in 2 districts, including at a hospital. You can see in the background through the window there. That must just be so frightening. Russians also targeted power transformers, leading to partial blackouts across the city. And you can tell by that white flash just at the beginning of that footage that a substation or similar has been struck, and then obviously the power goes out all over the shop. So 4 people have been injured in Kharkiv after a strike in the city. An outbuilding at a medical center was destroyed, according to reports. 3 parts of the city are without power following this strike. Tim White goes on to say Kharkiv Mayor Terekhov at the hospital where the attack happened. Russia is again trying to attack power targets in Chernihiv region as well. This is Dobropillia, which is right on the border with Kyiv Oblast. A fire burns at the impact site, so who knows what was hit there. In Kharkiv, they had to evacuate a hospital of all 57 patients. They've been moved to other medical facilities. 6 people injured by flying glass when the aerial bomb hit. Many others needed treatment for stress. A Ukrainian drone reached Moscow region while there's a red alert for a neighbouring Russian region of Ryazan. So, quite a few drones seem to be fired into Russia last night. We don't have any information really about the success of any of them, bar some firms data. I'll come to that in a second though. Another video from Kharkiv after Russia's aerial bomb demolished part of a hospital. A reminder that 6 patients were injured by shrapnel. Many reports of a total blackout in Belgorod as well. So that's a bit more information. It's stretching, but it said, Tim White said it is stretching the truth. The mayor says street power has shut off to prevent grid overloads and power outages. Traffic lights were still working even where street lights were out. So there are problems, but some do exaggerate. Yes, and I think that is... all we have there from Tim White. It's a video of this morning's a video from this morning to show the outcome of the strikes last night, aftermath of the Russian attack on Kharkiv. Quote, first was an explosion somewhere nearby, and then I don't remember anything. The glass cut my legs. It was terrible, just terrible, says one of the victims of the Russian strike on a hospital grounds in Kharkiv. And you can see the building there and the damage done. The building of the hospital was damaged. It's known that 6 patients in the medical facility were injured. 51 more suffered acute stress reactions. It's a claim there. We also understand that Kherson just gets hit every day. You can just assume every day horrific things are happening there without me having to tell you, without having to see the images. I'm going to do an interview of Caelan Robertson that was due to happen last night, but I presume he's in a Ukrainian village where he couldn't get a good enough reception. He sent me a voice note saying as much and was really apologetic. So we're going to reschedule that for tonight. And then appearing on my friend's podcast. He started up a video. He's going to interview me about global geopolitics and whatnot. So busy night tonight. But anyway, Caelan Robertson has just released a film on YouTube. I suggest you all go and check his YouTube channel out and check that video, Farmers of Kherson, where he details what they have to go through on a daily basis. That famous farmer that was in charge of the local sort of farming group association, I think, He was recently killed. I reported on that. He was one who was protecting other farmers, protecting his own farm, shooting drones out the sky. Really sadly, he was targeted and killed. And just it is incredible that these farmers right along the front lines really are still trying their hardest to make a living and to make food. The world needs their food. They're doing it despite the mines that litter their lands, despite the lack of water often, because particularly in this area with the explosion of the Novokakhovka Dam, the irrigation is ruined. There are no irrigation channels full of water now that would have come from that dammed lake. Is now just a river that flows through, and they do not get the irrigation that they so desperately need. Distressing scenes in Chernihiv this morning, says Tim White, in the village of Semenivka. A drone strike hit a clothes store. An eyewitness describes a man lying without a leg. A store owner, 29, was killed, while another local is in hospital. Chernihiv is just routinely hammered. Also in Chernihiv, Russian hit an oil depot in a town called Nizhin. 4 drones attacked the facility, and by the look of the video, it's been an extremely difficult night and morning for the heroic firefighters. No one was injured in that, but Russia is going for Ukraine's oil facilities, gas production. They are going for the hydrocarbon sector, partly as a retaliation, partly just in and of itself as a way of hurting Ukraine. After that particular strike in Chernihiv and hits in Kharkiv and Sumy Oblast, power restrictions are likely to be in effect in these regions. Residents and visitors should by now always ensure an emergency kit of power banks, torches, candles, matches and whatnot, and keep water and food topped up. Power cuts also in Dolinska and Novoprazhka in the Kivrograd region after strikes there. It's not said exactly what was hit other than critical infrastructure, but several trains have been delayed or rerouted, which tells you what you need to know. All fires were quickly extinguished by all accounts. And then, as we heard, Kherson as well. Tons of food was destroyed in Belazerka when 4 large lorries, clearly marked with the UN WFP, World Food Programme, were bombed by drones and artillery. 2 lorries were hit. Drivers managed to escape. It's absolutely appalling. And those with me last night, says Tim White, will have witnessed the shocking scenes from Kharkiv, where a hospital and a city was bombed. Here's what it looks like this morning. So all of those windows already boarded up. One building was destroyed. The wards were badly damaged. All 57 patients needed counselling. And then here's a building in Oleshki, which is the occupied area of Kherson, supposedly housing Russian troops there. It's believed Russian military and occupier police were based there. That has been massively hit. Looks like a guided glide bomb would be the munition that's done that. Okay, so that's a broad synopsis. Now, this morning, drones were flying over occupied Donetsk, as you can see there. It's a fairly large fixed wing drone there. Can't tell what that one is. Almost looks like a reconnaissance drone, to be honest. Especially if it's circling like that. Says some unknown drones there. I don't know. Fairly low for a reconnaissance drone. No. Yeah. Something's going on. Nizhny Novgorod in Russia. Debris from 6 Ukrainian drones. Scare quotes debris. That's what they claim. Oh, it's on fire. Debris fell down. We shot them down. We were successful in shooting them down. We definitely shot them down. But unfortunately, the debris did fall directly on the target, exactly where they were aiming for. Who knew? Anyway, debris from 6 Ukrainian drones reportedly struck a major energy facility, causing brief power outages. NASA firm's data shows a fire near the Arzamatskaya substation, which supplies power to 200,000 plus users, RZD traction stations and Gazprom facilities. So that was hit in this kind of area there. And then Feodosia in Crimea is still burning. This was yesterday. Some fairly serious fires still going on at the oil depot that was hit by the coast there. That was yesterday evening. Really substantial fires ongoing. Reports of pretty toxic smoke in the area. And I believe this is from this morning. So you can see this is a time-lapse video, so it's sped up. But that is kicking out all sorts of toxic fumes right across the area. But that is Feodosia very much on fire still. And also, occupied Crimea, this is from yesterday, a Russian 330 kilovolt Simferopol electrical substation was hit. And actually, that was in some serious trouble. A lot of fire burning off, a lot of whatever, something's burning there, and burning pretty well after Ukrainians struck it. So here's a map of the different places that were struck, I believe. At least this is according to Rebar. Occupied Crimea following strikes on Feodosia oil depot and the 490 megawatt Tavry power plant, although we weren't sure whether it's a plant or the substation. Ukrainian Neptune cruise missiles and drones struck the 117 megawatt Saki thermal power plant and two electrical substations, 220 kilovolt and 330 kilovolt, according to the Russians themselves. So this is Rebar mentioning that and claiming that all of these places were struck, including one out in the, I presume, a rig out in the sea there. So Russians maybe admitting that more had been struck yesterday than we had initially thought, but it seems to be an assault on the power grid in Crimea. Right, moving on to other bits and pieces, just going to make sure there's nothing that has emerged in the last few minutes. Yeah, there's lots of talk from Mark Rutte in the having a chat as the Secretary General of NATO there. More talk about these World Food Programme trucks being struck in Kherson. Belgorod residents say life in Russia is simply hopeless amid drone strikes, power outages and intercepted call. Suggests that that's the case. Can you imagine? I look and it's flying. Where will it fly and what will it do? What is it targeting? It's simply hopeless. That's the kind of effect that Ukraine will want to have on the Russian psyche, that's for sure. 75% of Ukrainians confident Ukraine will win, but most say the country lacks a strong warfighting ability 4 years in, and yeah, they need huge numbers of boots on the ground, really. Swedish mine clearance vehicle, but no, I don't know that there's any other news of somewhere in occupied Ukraine. A fuel tanker has been hit by a drone. Presumably the lorry was already working in Ukraine at the time of the invasion or brought from Russia, but it's an Italian Menzi tanker. That looks to be a little bit worse for wear as it's passed by this Russian vehicle. You can see the electronic warfare on the front of that vehicle there. But yeah, drone has taken out a tanker. So they really are aiming for the whole network of petrol and diesel, I would assume as well. Provision. Number of gas stations in Russia's Belgorod region are low on fuel. What's more, they've also followed the lead of elsewhere in Russia-occupied areas by banning canister filling. Angry residents point out that they were told to get generators, but now cannot fill them. So on and so forth. Okay, now moving on to other bits and pieces. So more bad news for Russia as oil sets to take another big downturn. So it's dropping again. It had sort of rallied a little bit, but still very low. And Jay in Kyiv says it's likely to go into the 50s. So it's $50 a barrel for Brent crude. Now, if Brent crude goes down, then Urals crude will go even lower. And if Brent crude is in the 50s, then the Russian crude will be in the low 50s and maybe even lower. And that's a real problem. With Russia's Urals oil selling at minus $15 discount, so it's even more than I thought it was. Actually, I was sort of going maybe 8 or 9, but Jay in Kyiv, take it with a pinch of salt, says Urals be selling 15 below, then that's really going to hurt the Russians. Things will get rough for the Moscow gargoyle and his global war plans. There is also talk the G7 is planning coordinated economic pressure that could hit Russia where it hurts them most, its oil revenue. As Ukraine increasingly targets oil facilities inside Russia, and the G7 now urges India and Turkey to reduce imports, suppression might finally force Putin to reconsider the war. It's really interesting listening to Dmytro Kuleba, the former foreign minister, interviewed by this excellent interview. Go and listen to it on The Rest is Politics. I've posted it on the community thread, so it's there, but go and search for it. The Rest is Politics. Alistair Campbell and Rory Stewart interviewing Dmytro Kuleba. He talks about, Putin won't change unless he's forced to change or the calculations change. And at the moment, nothing's looking like making that happen. The one thing that will make that happen is massive effort in economic terms to stymie the Russians, to really hurt them. And that would force Russia to change course, because at the moment, it's not going to happen militarily. Unless Ukraine is suddenly given a mass load of equipment that has tremendously different capabilities. It is a case of everything, a perfect storm of variables affecting Russia's calculation here, and forcing them to change their calculations, their trajectory. But Ukraine working to destroy the hydrocarbon sector in Russia, while G7 and EU and hopefully the US can help there, that could have a cumulative effect. Mark Rutte, as mentioned, has been speaking a lot today. As long as Russian aircraft don't pose a threat, that is to NATO airspace, we will gently guide them out of our airspace. It's a proportional response. We are so much stronger than the Russians. If we were weak, maybe we'd shoot them down immediately, but being stronger, our reaction is proportionate. Take comfort in the fact that NATO is 25 times bigger than the Russian economy. Our military is infinitely superior to the Russian military. When it comes to our air force, the Russians cannot even stand in the shadow with these MiG-31s or whatever they call them. Now, it's interesting, Ben Hodges saying that, if NATO got into war with Russia, they would just take out Kaliningrad straight away. That would just be like, well, that's gone. And then, they would be, what else? He said Kaliningrad, and then, Sevastopol as well. He said all the military targets in Sevastopol, like I've said to you before, NATO would just take out Yelabuga. That, I'm sure that'd be the first thing that you'd see go. Chancellor Merz yesterday said in Egypt the following: we must not forget, just a few hours flight away, Russia's war against Ukraine has been going on for 3.5 years. For us, this war in Europe is the greatest threat to our freedom. I make no secret of it. We're counting on the lasting support of the USA. Yep, good stuff there. Speaking about the importance of Russia, basically, while there's all the stuff going on to do with Israel and Hamas. Tim White says more signs of panic in Moscow as attention is drawn to the work of Khodorkovsky and Kasparov, who have been sounding off. They're among 22 Russians charged with, quote, violent seizure of power and organizing a terrorist group. Civilized countries call it democracy. His report by a translation of a report by Sota, but basically the FSB are going after dissenters. No surprise there, but that's what freedom looks like in Russia. President Trump has confirmed on board Air Force One that he intends to meet with Zelenskyy at the White House on Friday. There's already the team, diplomatic team is already out in the US, I believe, preceding Zelenskyy. He will be out there on Friday speaking with Trump. They're going to be talking about Tomahawks is one of the things, that's for sure. Also worth mentioning, says Gerashenko, that this week Oshkosh Defense unveiled the XMAV, a land-based launcher configured with Tomahawk cruise missiles at the ALSA 2025 exhibition. So here they are. You might see this picture do the rounds. I know of a country where these launchers could be tested thoroughly. Previously, these missiles were typically launched from vertical launch systems installed on cruisers and destroyers. Tomahawk missiles can also be launched from submarines. So we know that there's a Typhon system, which is a ground-based system, but it looks like there are now going to be multiple options to launch these, which is exactly what Ukraine would want. One of the criticisms of Ukraine getting Tomahawks is they have no way of firing them. Well, there are actually Typhon systems. Now there are these other alternatives from Oshkosh. So US defense manufacturer reveals a new Tomahawk launcher, just what Ukraine would like to hit Russia, says Kyiv Independent. The Tomahawk's range would open up great swathes of Russia to Ukrainian long-range missile strikes, most notably Moscow and St. Petersburg, although we hear that they would only be able to hit military targets. And we were hearing from the Financial Times over the last 24 hours that the US would only be able to transfer between 20 and 50 Tomahawks to Ukraine, not enough to change the course of the war. Quote, the US has about 4,150 Tomahawk missiles, but will be able to transfer only a few dozen to Ukraine. New purchases are limited, says a former Pentagon official, Mark Kanchian. So these will be purchased from, I presume, through the PURL initiative from allies in Europe and beyond. They won't be given by the United States. But they could certainly cause some havoc. Someone says, I'll be looking at these power stations or the other 22 refineries on a bingo card. They won't be used for that. I can guarantee you. I think they want to be careful to keep these at military targets, such as air bases and command nodes and whatnot. Maybe even, I don't know, ships. Lukashenko has warned that Tomahawk missiles... Lukashenko is a Belarusian dictator who is at the moment really sounding off against Ukraine. He says that they, quote, won't bring peace to Ukraine, but could lead to nuclear war. He added, Donald Trump probably understands this best, which is why he's no rush to hand over such deadly weapons or allow strikes deep into Russia, as Zelenskyy hopes. So there you go. That's a bit of a summary of what's going on with the Tomahawks. Thank you for watching. Really appreciate your support. Take care, and I shall speak to you soon.